Hello, welcome to our Bible study for today. We're going to be looking at John chapter 4, and I'm excited to do this one. You guys probably will be very familiar with this story if you've been around church at all, or even culturally. It's a pretty popular passage. So we're going to be talking about the woman at the well. Do this one, you guys probably. And so here we go. We're going to dive right in, and I'm going to share my screen if you're watching this and just walk through the passage as we normally do. But before we do that, I want to comment on a couple of things. It's important to note, and we'll see as we walk through this text, that Samaritan culture was kind of a lower class citizen of Israel, looked down upon, kind of unclean. And then also, again, here we have Jesus interacting with a woman, which you should be picking up on theme here, that Jesus and John really emphasizes the role women had in Jesus's ministry, that Jesus is seeking, I truly believe, to tear down the walls of patriarchy and to bring women to the table as equals. We'll see, and especially like the woman at the well, if you know the story at all. If you don't know the story, obviously she was a woman of ill repute, and here Jesus is not only interacting with a woman, but a woman of ill repute, which is a huge no-no of the culture. Any respectable man would not interact with a woman of this class. So it's a woman, one strike against her. She's a promiscuous woman, another huge strike against her. And she's a Samaritan, another strike against her. And so Jesus is poking the bear a bit. He's entering into the fray. He is trying to upend the kingdom of the world, to kind of reveal to us what his kingdom is like, who is accepted in his kingdom. And so this is a passage, this is a story where Jesus, what would be the equivalent today? It would, I don't know. You can kind of, maybe that's a discussion we could have. And Jesus entered in that and sought, and I know that the word equity is used a lot, sought to bring equity to this woman, to this class of citizen in this world. And ultimately, that's partly what got Jesus killed. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. This was a big reason. And so John here is writing about this. And so let's walk through the story. If you've heard it, I'm going to be reading from the translation of the Message. Jesus realized that the Pharisees were keeping count of the baptisms that he and John performed, although his disciples, not Jesus, did the actual baptizing. They had posted the score that Jesus was ahead, turning him and John into rivals in the eyes of the people. So Jesus left the Judean countryside and went back to Galilee. To get there, he had to pass through Samaria. He came into Sychar, a Samaritan village that bordered the field, Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was still there. Jesus, worn out by the trip, sat down by the well. It was noon. So here Jesus is moving on in his ministry, and Jesus, we see throughout the scriptures, he continually moves on. He continually goes to new places, to new people. Obviously, he's in a situation here in Jerusalem, the Judean countryside near Jerusalem, and him and John, they're doing a lot of work. And so Jesus said, you know what, we're gonna head north, go back to Galilee, but Jesus heads through Samaria. And most this is also monumental of Jesus. Most good Jews, good Israelites would go around Samaria. Jesus chose to go through Samaria. Now we do that today, right? A lot of folks will choose to go around certain neighborhoods because of people of ill repute live there, right? We don't want to be there. We lock our doors when we drive through. We do all these microaggressions towards people in different communities, and so those kinds of things are as old as time. And so Jesus is breaking those things down. He is breaking down racism. He's breaking down discrimination, and so Jesus, throughout his ministry, goes straight through Samaria. He does not avoid it, and he interacts with the people there. And so here, kind of the setting of what's happening. And he's by Jacob's Well. He's by kind of a landmark, a famous landmark. It's still there actually today. They believe the well. I mean, it makes logical sense how they deduce that it still is the same well today. Whether or not Jacob actually was the one who dug it, who knows? But it's a popular spot, well-known spot, especially in ancient Israel here. And so they stop, as we do, and when we're traveling, we probably pick different landmarks, different spots when we're traveling, or we're going to stop there for lunch. And so similarly, I'm sure as they set out, let's stop at this village to eat lunch. And so this is what they're doing. And so here we are. Verse 7, a woman, a Samaritan, came to draw water. Jesus said, "Would you give me a drink of water?" His disciples had gone to the village to buy food for lunch, which I just ate. So it's hitting me. And so here the disciples had gone into the village for lunch. Jesus is chilling. I think, as the story develops, I think Jesus intentionally stayed at the well, knowing full well what was about to happen. Jesus was a smart man. Sometimes in this passage, and we'll see it here in a moment, that people say, well, Jesus had this supernatural ability to kind of see into people's souls, which is probably true, right? He definitely had an ability to see into people's souls. But I don't think in this moment he's doing anything that we also don't have access to. He's using his intuition. He's using his spiritual, he's got his spiritual eyes on, so he's using his discernment. He's using gifts that we have, right? He knows where he's at. He knows he's in Samaria, right? He knows he wants to interact. He's been intentional about going through. He knows that women of ill repute will do their chores during the hottest part of the day around this time. He knows that they have to come get water. And so he knows it's fairly likely that someone's going to come that he wants to tell the good news, the gospel to. And so I think Jesus had a spiritual lens. Like, we could practice this as well. We could easily be people that interact like Jesus here and have, but I think what we tend to do as believers is we tend to take our spiritual lens off. We have intuition, we have discernment, and we tend to take those lenses off. Kind of a cultural example of this. We were at the football game, me and my boys and Kelly and Sarah, and one of the Michigan players his family were sitting near us, and I got to chatting with them and all sorts of things. So I knew they were family, and so towards the end of the game, they moved down to the sideline, and I said, "Hey boys, you want to see a Michigan football player up close?" And they're like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." And so I took them down to the side, like the edge of the stadium. We weren't actually on the field, and Gideon, he's like, Dad, are we gonna go on the field? You said we were gonna get up close to a player. I was like, no, there's gonna be a player that's gonna run over here after the game's over. He's like, no, they're not. They're, Michigan, the Michigan crew is on the other side of the field from us, and but like, you wait, right? Because I knew, I had intuition, I had discernment that football player was going to come say hi to his family. And sure enough, he comes running over, and the boys were like, how did you know? Like I didn't see into the future. I didn't do all those things. I just used my intuition. I deduced a few things. And so this is what Jesus is doing. He's using his intuition. He's deducing his few things, but he has his spiritual glasses on because he wants to interact and give someone spiritual direction. And so his disciples are at lunch. Jesus is here. And so the Samaritan woman, verse 9, taken aback, asked, how come you, a Jew, are asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? Jews in those days wouldn't be caught dead talking to Samaritans. See, here it is. The text is giving us clues to Jesus. I think John's being very intentional here about Jesus breaking down this inequity, breaking down these cultural things that try to put people down. Like, Jesus is about elevating people, equality. Everyone has a seat at the table. And so hopefully we'll spend some time talking on our call about that. How do we reach out to those groups of people as a church to show them that there's equality? Jesus uses discernment. He uses his intuition here to reach out to those who are feeling inequality, to bring them to the table, to invite them to his table. Jesus answered her, he says, if you knew the generosity of God and who I am, you would be asking me for a drink, and I would give you fresh living water. The woman said, sir, you don't even have a bucket to draw with, and this well is deep. So how are you going to get this living water? Are you a better man than our ancestor Jacob, who dug this well and drank from it, he and his sons and livestock, and passed it down to us? Jesus said, everyone who drinks this water will get thirsty again and again. Anyone who drinks the water I give them will thirst not ever. The water I give them will be an artesian spring within, gushing fountains of endless life. The woman said, sir, give me this water so I won't ever get thirsty, won't ever have to come back to this well again. So here Jesus tells her, it's the living water. This is the water. I have the living water, the water that will never, you will never be thirsty again. And so he's hitting on obviously a spiritual element here, that we all seek to satisfy the thirst, the lusts of life that, as we're going to see, this woman pursued. And Jesus is saying, no, in me, all of those things are satisfied. And I think you don't have to live life long to know that nothing really truly satisfies. That sometimes I remember I used to think, well, if I just had this thing, right, this item, then life would be satisfactory. If I just attained and achieved this level of success in my job, I would be satisfied. And on and on and on it goes, right? And then eventually what happens is we realize those things actually never satisfy. Like, we always want more, we need more. Just like water here on earth, right? We're always going to need to drink water. There's never going to be a satisfaction that fully satisfies us. And Jesus brings that full satisfaction. He is the water that will never thirst again. And so he can fulfill those things. And so Jesus is saying that life in him, life in his kingdom, is fully satisfactory, because we can find contentment, we can find peace, we can find joy, walking in the ways of Jesus, following hard after him. And so that's what Jesus is calling this woman to. It's what he's calling us to, that we don't have to attain some level of success to be satisfied in God's kingdom. And it's difficult, right? Because our flesh is always pulling us in a direction. Our flesh is always pulling us towards wanting more. The world it's a huge draw to do that. But in Christ's kingdom, we don't need that. And I think if you've been following Christ long enough, you've probably had those moments where you just feel very satisfied, very at peace and contentment. And it's like, that is what we are called to pursue. That's what Jesus invites us to, that's that full life, that exciting life, that life of where we don't want. But then that flesh, it pulls at us and we get sucked into to that game where we're pursuing that, and we feel unsatisfied. And I don't know about you, this is constant back and forth war within. And so we always want to plant ourselves, the psalmist, and actually the first Psalm tells us to plant our roots by streams of living water, this water who is Christ, to plant our roots deep into Jesus Christ. And so what are some rhythms that you have to put your roots into Jesus? This is one of them. Getting on this Bible study call is one where we begin to dig our roots into Jesus. We do that. And so I think there needs to be something every day that we're renewing ourselves. We're digging those roots into Jesus. So we're going to continue. Verse 16. He said, "Go call your husband and then come back." And then she said, "I have no husband." "That's nicely put. I have no husband. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now isn't even your husband. You spoke the truth there. Sure enough." She says, "Oh, so you're a prophet. Well, tell me this. Our ancestors worshiped God at this mountain, but you Jews insist that Jerusalem is the only place for worship, right? Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you Samaritans will worship the Father neither here at this mountain nor there in Jerusalem. You worship guessing in the dark. We Jews worship in the clear light of day. God's way of salvation is made available through the Jews, but the time is coming. It has, in fact, come when what you're called will not matter, and where you go to worship will not matter." So here, again, Jesus uses an intuition. He knows that this woman is promiscuous. He knows this woman's an outcast. Maybe even, he knew, he called how many husbands she had. I don't know what cues he used to figure that out. Maybe he did tap into some of his divine insight here. I don't think that he did, because we look at other texts, he chose to set those things aside, and I believe he tapped into human things that we have, in human intuition, human discernment, and so I think he was able to see into her life through his interactions with her about that. Maybe she was known in the area, maybe he picked up on some things. I don't know how, but he obviously knew, and it wouldn't have been that hard to know if you're paying attention, that she was a promiscuous woman and likely not married. And so he calls it out, right? And he's calling out her thing that she's looking to for satisfaction. She's looking to a man to provide for her, right? In this culture, as a woman, your only provision comes through having a man. So for her, she knew that to be satisfied in this world, she needed a man. She probably was looking for love in all the wrong places, right? If those things didn't work out, she wasn't feeling satisfied. And so Jesus is telling her that you're looking for all that stuff in the wrong places, that it's only found in my kingdom. And she kind of calls him out, like, well, like, we aren't allowed to worship in Jerusalem. We have to worship here, and we're not good enough, right? Like, she's calling out the social dynamic that has been in place, that the Samaritans weren't good enough and they weren't equitable. And what does Jesus say? In my kingdom, it won't matter. It won't matter that you're Samaritan. It won't matter where you worship. And that is the beauty of the gospel, that Jesus breaks down those barriers, that he breaks down those walls. He breaks down those doors, and he brings unity around one table that we are all invited to. And so there is no Jew, and there's no Greek, there's no Samaritan, right? We are all one in Christ. And that's important to understand, especially in the culture in which we live, where we want to divide. We want to separate ourselves into tribes based on skin color, based on affluence or influence. We want to divide ourselves into tribes based on sexual preference. We want to divide ourselves into tribes based on where we live, where we grew up, how, our accents, all sorts of things. And what it ultimately boils down to is those that are in power want to push down everyone else so that they can feel that power and that satisfaction. They think that's what's going to fulfill them, right? If we just have this power, but to do that, we have to put these others down. And so Jesus is saying, no. We all are elevated, and we all are going to drink from this living water. We all are going to be satisfied in Christ's kingdom. That no one is without in Christ's kingdom. That's the biggest issue right now in our culture, I think, is if people think if we forgive debt, then that means that I have to pay their debt. And that's what Jesus was all about. Well, yeah, but that's what we do for each other. We help each other out. We all elevate each other. So some may sacrifice so others can be lifted up, so that we are all equal at the table together. And that is the way of Christ's kingdom. But in the midst of that, no one is without. And that's the beauty of the gospel, as Jesus is telling us here, that no one will thirst in his kingdom. And so it doesn't matter. You will all worship in the same place. Verse 23 says this: it's who you are and the way you live that count before God. Your worship must engage your spirit in the pursuit of truth. That's the kind of people the Father is out looking for, those who are simply and honestly themselves before him in their worship. God is sheer being himself, itself, spirit. Those who worship him must do it out of their very being, their spirits, their true selves, and adoration. I think this is important too, that we understand that we are called to worship as we worship God. I think we try to force others into worshiping how we worship, and Jesus is telling the Samaritan woman here that we want to live and worship as we were designed and created to be. And so what was happening in these days, likely partly, and happens today, is we want to force people to worship our way, to do it our way or the highway. And Jesus is saying, no, that's not the way of the kingdom, that we must do it out of our true selves in adoration, that we give all over to God. And so some of us, I think it's important as we look at our worship environment that we allow people to worship in the way in which they feel led to worship. So some people might be more charismatic in their worship. They might want to raise their hands. They might want to dance. And for some of us, that makes us uncomfortable. But then some of us like to be more meditative and contemplative. And so for those that like dance around and jump around, they don't understand that either. Right. And some of us just are somewhere in the middle, maybe. We can kind of live in both elements, or maybe the style of worship speaks to us better. Like some of us might be like more, we really like the hymns, and we don't understand why someone would want to have praise songs, and then vice versa. We love the praise songs, and we don't understand why someone would want the hymns, and we go on and on and on. And I think what God is asking us to do is to give space for everyone to worship in the way in which they want to connect. And so to that end, I don't think every church is for everyone, right? Because some, like, you cannot like at St. Paul's, we definitely try to blend different styles of worship, but we don't want to we're not going to be able to do everything that's out there in the realm of worship. And so for some folks, they maybe walk in here and they think, well, that's not for me. And to me, that's okay, because they need to find a place where they can worship and be their true selves. And then worship also, honestly, isn't just in the worship service, but worship with all of our life. And so how we serve God out in the community, how we serve God each and every day, how we worship him with our life. Romans talks about being a living sacrifice, that our spiritual act of worship is is actually continually sacrificing ourselves throughout the day, throughout the week. And so we might all approach that differently, how we worship God with our lives. And so we need to give space for each other to do that as well, that we all have different gifts, we all have different passions. And so Jesus is talking about that here, that those things, the way we worship, both in a formal setting like a church building, back then a synagogue, or with our everyday lives, needs to be honest and authentic of who we truly are. The passage continues, verse 25. The woman said, I don't know about that. I do know that the Messiah is coming. When he arrives, we'll get the whole story. Jesus says, I am he. You don't have to wait any longer or look any further. Just then his disciples came back. They were shocked. They couldn't believe that he was talking with that kind of a woman. No one said what they were thinking, but all their faces showed it. The woman took the hint and left. In her confusion, she left her water pot. Back in the village, she told the people, come, see a man who knew all the things I did, about all the things I did, who knows me inside and out. Do you think this could be the Messiah? And they went out to see for themselves. And so here, this woman left her pot. She was so excited. She was so transformed in that moment by Jesus, by someone taking the time for her. I think she was so impacted that someone would take the time and show care for her, show love for her, invite her into a new life. And for her, that the Messiah, the King, had come and spent time with her, right? How much more should we then spend time with the down and outers, the lowly, those who experience injustice and equity? And so I think when we looked at the life of Jesus, he was passionate about this. He entered into this. And then as a result, like, of her transformation, the town began their process of being transformed. And so it's exciting to see that. It's exciting to see this example of Jesus. It's encouraging. And, when you're out there and you're like, well, Christians are so selfish. They're just about themselves. They're just about power. They're just about prestige or whatever, and holding on to power. Point them to this story. All right. Well, maybe Christians do that, what you're describing, but this is the type of Christian Jesus has called us to be, to enter into the fray with the broken, with the lonely, with the down and outers, the outcasts, those who experience inequity, those who are experiencing injustice, those who are just lost in their own muck. Jesus was about them. And that, my friends, is the story of the woman at the well. So I look forward to hanging out and discussing this further.